Hey everyone, Ashley Mailloux here with the Daily Racing Form. This Saturday out at Monmouth Park is a loaded card. 14 races in total, plenty of stakes races within those races, and it's highlighted obviously by race number 12, the Grade 1 Haskell. At 1.125 miles on the dirt for 3-year-olds, a field of 8 is what we'll take a look at here in this stakes preview. And just looking at the slate here, some big names. We'll see Mage kind of prep his way for the Travers later this summer, won the Kentucky Derby earlier this year. Tappet Trice, disappointed in the Derby, but came back to finish third in the Belmont. Extra Anejo is a horse that's sort of going to maybe make a name for himself, finally getting into stakes competition, but he has been very impressive in his 3 races so far. Arabian Night, the morning line favorite, 2 for 2. He's been sensational in his 2 starts, but we haven't seen him since late January at Monmouth Park. And then some others, Go Rocket Ride. I mean, it's a tremendous field top to bottom, so let's not waste any time. Dive right into it here with the number 1, Go Rocket Ride, trained by Richard Mandela. We'll take a look at that most recent performance in the Affirmed, which is first race back since March. They were looking for other spots for him, and he had a couple setbacks and decided to wait for the $100,000 Affirmed. And I just thought him in the stretch run here, he's the number 6. How impressive was he? He was able to really kick on here. Second time going around 2 turns at that 1.16 mile distance. And, I think before that he was impressive, but to see him get another win on his cap, I think that is great. Even prior to that, when he was second behind Practical Moves in a Grade 2 event. He's a horse that I think is getting better. He's got limited experience, and with the connections, they've been really, thinking about some other spots for him throughout the road, and, he had setbacks, fever at one point. So I love that they're going to ship him to the East Coast and put him in the Haskell. Mike Smith set to ride him for the first time. The number 2, Awesome Strong. He's a 3-year-old son of Awesome Slew, who was sensational down in South Florida, but in his first start this year off the long layoff, they sent him to Delaware, and he only beat 1 runner in that field. From a numbers perspective, his number was about on par for what he was running before, but he just was not very impressive as the favorite in there. Maybe he needed the race. My question also is in the Florida Sire Stakes down in Florida. You see squashed his competition in each of those, going from that 6 furlong to 7 to 1.16 miles in distance, but just not really sure what he faced there. Turbo is a nice horse who was the runner-up in 2 of those efforts. Knox is a decent horse as well, but they're not this caliber, so I do think this is a deep spot for him, but he does sort of have that home advantage now that he's been stabled up at Monmouth Park for quite some time. The number 3, Salute the Stars, this one trained by Brad Cox, won the Pegasus prep for this last time out. We'll take a look here at the stretch run. And in terms of the performance here, I thought he got a great trip from Joel Rosari, who was booked to ride once again. I think looking at how the trip panned out, he wasn't too far off of it early on, but he only had a couple of horses beaten and made a nice, really late move here to get up in time, going 1.16 miles. And I think he's going to appreciate the 1.125 mile distance. Now, going to be in deeper waters. He did beat Kingsbarn last time out, as well as How Great Is Nate, who finished 3rd in the race. He'll still need to take a step forward, but I think what we saw last time out, it was good. His numbers certainly improved as well. He got a 93 Beyer speed figure for the effort. I think taking that step forward, it's something we could certainly see from him, but there's others in here that I think I have a little bit of a stronger opinion on. That includes the number 4, Mage, who, how impressive was he in the Kentucky Derby? And then we'll take a look at his most recent performance in the Preakness. So he's trying to keep the Triple Crown dream alive, and he does come up short in here. He ends up finishing 3rd. I thought he was pretty even here in the stretch run. Now, when you look at how the race panned out, National Treasure had everything sort of go his way. He had a position early on. He set really reasonable or sensible fractions, to say the least, and I think that didn't help Mage, knowing his running style is usually coming from off of it. I think Javier did put him in a good position early on. The concern with everyone was what would happen pace-wise, and it just did not set up for him. They've been talking about whether they were going to come to the Haskell, whether they were going to go to the Travers and look at other options, or just go straight to the Travers. And, it's been talked about. This is a prep for him to get him to the Travers. So we'll see how cranked up he is. We haven't seen him since May 20th, but he's been training very well. Social media has been chirping about how good he looks in preparation for this. So we'll see, but this is a tough race. This is tougher than some other potential races that maybe we could have seen him in, with the exception maybe of the Jim Dandy, which looks to be a stacked field this year. The number 5, Tappet Trice, son of Tappet, who he just never does himself favors. He's always slow out of the gate. It usually takes him a while to get going, and it's kind of been at a disadvantage for him. He was very impressive in the Bluegrass. I thought he ran very well and was gritty. Verifying finished behind him, and he just put a good performance in the Indiana Derby. Next time out, Tapit Trice, it didn't pan out. I don't think he got the best of trips. He closed from very far back from last at one point to finish 7th, and that's kind of his style, right? So everyone talked about the Belmont being what he needed, 1.5 miles. It still wasn't enough. He was beaten by a length and a half, but I did think it was a good effort. Arcangelo ended up, winning that one by a length and a half, and Forte was just a nose in front of Tapit Trice when it was all said and done. But I think he's a game horse. If the pace is right, we'll be looking for him late here in the stretch. We'll move on now to the number 6, How Great Is Nate? As we mentioned earlier, was 3rd for trainer Liz Doble's last time out in the Pegasus, and he's a horse that pretty consistent in the beginning of his career. We didn't see him until August of 2022, but he went on a win tear. He won 4 races in a row, obviously had some issues in the Gotham, stumbled, lost his jock, and it took him a little bit to kind of find his gears again. He was 4th in the private terms, but came back in the Long Branch to win, and then more recently in the Pegasus. So both of his performances at Monmouth Park, they've been quite respectable. I thought last time out in terms of his performance, I still think he needed more. That was going 1 1/16 miles. My question then becomes 1 1/8 miles. Is 1 1/8 miles really his best game? I'm not sure. I'm wondering if he's more of a miler or maybe even shorter than that in the future. But with the performance last time out, he has earned the spot here in this opportunity in the Haskell. Next, the number 7, Extra Anejo. This one trained by Steve Asmussen. Very impressive on debut. That was at Keeneland back in October. They put him on the shelf. They brought him back to Churchill, thinking Derby weekend. And he finished 2nd behind Federal Judge. I thought leaving the gate, he could have been a little bit sharper out of the gate, and in terms of his running style, I liked that he was actually closing late, right? It was different than what we saw on debut, and then more recently, when he was able to win at Ellis Park, he crushed his competition in that field. And I know it was a compact field. You wonder what he really faced there, but I think he overcame some things in that race as well, and I think we haven't seen the best of him yet. I think he's probably in here the wild card, just knowing that he hasn't tackled stakes competition, but the fields that he has faced, he has crushed them. Tyler Gaffleon was aboard him for his first 2 starts, booked to ride again. He's been training at Saratoga most recently, and quite impressive. And then rounding out the field, certainly last but not least, the morning line favorite, the number 8, Arabian Night. Another one that has that kind of wow factor, but he's been very impressive on debut. And then more recently, we'll take a look at the Grade 3 Southwest at Oaklawn Park. In terms of the performance that he ended up getting, again, super sharp out of the gate and just continues to open up. And he makes it look so easy in the end. To me, he's got maybe that monster factor is the word that's been kind of, thrown out there, but my concern would be we haven't seen him between November and January and now, but Bob Baffert, the amount of success he's had in the Haskell, I think he knows which horses to send here. I think he has a lot of hopes for this one, just making his 3rd career start, and you have to think with the purchase price, they were having high hopes for him as well, so nice to see him make the field for the Grade 1 Haskell. But that is the field of 8 for this year's edition, and as I mentioned, the layoff for Arabian Night, maybe a little bit of a concern, but knowing Bob's success in the race, knowing the way that this horse has been training, horses that won last time out off the shelf in that first start, very successful numbers. So I do go to the favorite on top in here. I do have a couple other interesting horses, though. I think the horse directly to his inside, the number 7, Extra Anejo. He's the wild card in here. I've mentioned that. I've used that word several times now to reiterate the point that we just really don't know what we're getting. They paid a lot of money for him. Been very impressive. He hasn't made it to stakes level yet. They're putting him in a Grade 1. I think Steve really must think that this horse is really talented. So I'm going to use him here in the 2nd spot. Then I'll go to the number 1, Go Rocket Ride. Is a horse that I've been a fan of kind of since his debut. I loved what I saw, and I've loved what we've seen in those following efforts. And Richard Mandela deciding to go here, I think, is a big plus. And, he's only shipped for this race once, and he was able to win it several years ago. So I thought that was a positive sign as well. And then finally, Kentucky Derby winner Mage. Wouldn't be shocked to see him show up in a big way. I just thought, knowing that the longer game here is the Travers, he's had a little bit of time off, they were unsure if they were going to come here, decided to use him underneath. I'm very curious in terms of tote action how the Haskell will shape up. I think it's going to be very interesting, but for me, top pick, the number 8, Arabian Night, gets the nod over the number 7, Extra Anejo. Good luck in this big race on Saturday.